Hello. Thank you for joining us for our first live adoptaship presentation of 2024. My name is Michelle. I work at Canadian Geographic Education in Ottawa, Ontario, on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin peoples, and I'm delighted to be your host today. Adoptaship is your opportunity to learn more about the Canadian Coast Guard, which is Canada's leading agency responsible for the protection of marine environments and the safety of all mariners who travel across Canadian waters. We hope you can join us once a week for the next 5 weeks as different members of the Coast Guard share their stories about things like safe navigation, search and rescue, training programs, underwater research, and more. We've prepared a fun activity booklet available on our website, which you can use to adopt and track a ship of your choice from the Coast Guard fleet. And also on our website are details about our classroom contest. So we're asking you to share a collage reflecting the lessons you've learned from the Coast Guard for a chance to win a fabulous prize pack for your class. And finally, if you have questions for the commissioner himself, send them to us using the form that's on our website, and we'll use them to interview the commissioner during our final presentation. So today, we're visiting with a member of the Coast Guard's Marine Communications and Traffic Services program. So I'll encourage you to use the chat window to share any thoughts or questions that you have throughout the presentation, but save your most important questions for the question and answer period at the end. So why don't we dive right in and meet our first guest, Mr. Timothy Raynor, who's joining us today from Halifax, Nova Scotia. So Tim, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm going to load up your slides and I'll invite you to kick off your presentation.
Excellent. Hello, everyone. My name's Tim Raynor, and I've worked with the Canadian Coast Guard in Marine Communications and Traffic Services, or MCTS, for the past 15 years. And over that time, my career's had many roles. I've worked in the operations room that we'll get to see later. I've trained new employees for the station. I've been a regional training officer. I've been an officer in charge of a station, and I'm currently a shift supervisor at MCTS Halifax, which is the station that's the pictures on the screen. So what is MCTS? So Marine Communications and Traffic Services is what that stands for. So as you can see here, there's an MCTS officer who's working on the radio. So we have lots of stations all throughout the country. These are just a few of them. So we have more stations than this, but as you can see, we have out on the East Coast, we have Halifax, and we have Labrador. We have Quebec City Station. We have one up north in Iqaluit that talks to people in the north. We have some down on the Great Lakes, such as Sarnia. And then out on the West Coast, we have places like Victoria and Prince Rupert. So you can see that we're all over the country in different places. So what does MCTS do? So one half of what we do is the marine communications side. So this is like 911, but for ships out on the ocean. So we help keep people safe at sea. We help everyone understand what's happening out on the water, and we help protect the environment through MCTS and the Coast Guard. And we'll look a little bit more into each of these. So how does MCTS help keep people safe? So you may have heard this word before, Mayday. It kind of means emergency. So if someone's in danger, they may pick up the radio on their boat and say, Mayday, I need help. So they may grab a radio just like this one and grab it and speak into it. And on the other end of that radio here at the station, we're listening and we'll answer them and we'll get information from them. So Mayday actually comes from a French word, Mayday, which means help me. So that's why people say the word Mayday when they're in danger. So if somebody does call in a Mayday, there's two very critical pieces of information we need. So students, have a think about what the Coast Guard would consider two crucial pieces of information in emergency situations as we listen to an actual emergency situation here. So some examples of Maydays would be a person falling overboard from a vessel. injuries like workplace injuries, or if they're on a sailboat getting hit in the head with the boom, a vessel that's sinking, a vessel that's on fire. So we deal with all of those situations. We talk to people in all of those. So if you're ever out on the water and you have a marine radio and you hear this sound, that means listen closely. It's called a distress tone generator. That means a Mayday Relay is about to happen. So some very important information is coming. So this is an actual Mayday Relay done by Labrador Coast Guard Radio a couple of weeks ago.
Mayday Relay, Mayday Relay, Mayday Relay. All stations, all stations, all stations. This is Labrador Coast Guard Radio, Labrador Coast Guard Radio, Labrador Coast Guard Radio. MSI 003160022. Mayday at 071428 Coordinated Universal Time. Fishing vessel Northern Osprey 3 is taking on water in position 5324.3 north, 5554.3 west. I say again, in position 5324.3 north, 5554.3 west, with 30 people on board. Northern Osprey 3 is an 80-meter fishing vessel with blue hull and white superstructure. Any vessel able to assist is asked to contact Labrador Coast Guard Radio with their position and ETA on scene. This is Labrador Coast Guard Radio, over.
So that's a picture of that fishing vessel that was taking on water. And there's a little map that shows you exactly where that was happening off Labrador. So that was an officer who took a call from a vessel. The vessel called for help. We were getting other vessels in the area to know what was going on. So that's what we do in distress situations. So the critical pieces for an emergency situation for the Coast Guard, there's two of them: the position and the number of persons on board. Because if we know where they are and how many people we have to find, even if we get nothing else, we can make sure that we get everybody safe because we know how many people we're looking for and where they're going to be. So those are the two critical pieces of information that we need to get. So after that, after we do a Mayday Relay, we'll call the Joint Rescue Coordination Center, which is an emergency response unit who decides what kinds of response we're going to get. So sometimes they only decide to send Coast Guard vessels, like Coast Guard cutters or larger Coast Guard boats if it's further offshore. They also work with the military, so they may get some military aircraft, like a search and rescue helicopter Cormorant or a C-130 Hercules. We get those going out to vessels in danger. So they're the ones that will coordinate those aircraft and let us know who's proceeding on scene while we're talking to the person that's in danger. So that's how we help out in Mayday situations. Other things that we do are maritime assistance request broadcasts. So this is a vessel that's broken down, but doesn't really need Coast Guard response. They just need a little bit of help. Maybe it's thick fog and they can't navigate. Maybe their charts aren't good enough to know where they are. Maybe it's something like they have a broken piece of equipment and they need help. So we can do a broadcast on their behalf out to everybody else to see if there's somebody else who can go help them. So if somebody else can help them, that way the Coast Guard can be kept back for emergency situations. Other fishers or sailors will often come over in their boat and help out the boat that needs help. So that's what we're here for, to do those broadcasts. Another way is we provide safety information radio broadcasts, things about storm warnings, freezing spray warnings, or water spouts, which are basically tornadoes over water. So we do broadcasts about those to let mariners in the marine community know that those things are coming. And the other one that we have is a continuous marine broadcast. So running all the time on the radio, we have a broadcast about weather information. So if a boat is out to sea, they can tune in on their radio and hear the weather. And that sounds something like this.
Prévision pour Halifax, Halifax, Centre-Ville et Halifax, Lake Major et mis par environnement.
So that runs constantly, so people can tune in whenever they want to get the marine weather. So you can see here, each of these green triangles is a fishing vessel that's coming back into Nova Scotia. So this is off the southwest coast of Nova Scotia. Each and every one of those green triangles is a fishing boat that's heard a broadcast about bad weather coming and now they're coming back in. So that's why it's so important that we do those broadcasts, because if they get caught out in that bad weather, then you might get an emergency situation like a Mayday. Another thing that we do is we provide ice information to ships. So you can see here, this is actually ice information from 2020 for the Gulf of St. Lawrence. So that's between Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Newfoundland. That's in the Gulf there. So you can see all these different colors are different thicknesses of ice. And you can kind of see that the more north that you get, the thicker the ice gets, because obviously the temperature's colder. But then they create corridors so the vessels can get into the St. Lawrence River. And then the other picture over here is actually the iceberg chart from the same time. So you can see every single one of those numbers in a box is actually the number of icebergs in that little section of water. So we're letting mariners know that there's icebergs. If any of you have heard about the Titanic, you know how dangerous icebergs can be for ships. Another way that we keep people safe is we produce navigational warnings about possible dangers. Things like buoys off position or unlighted. So a lot of buoys will have a light on top so you can see them at night. If they're not there when you're trying to navigate and you're used to using them, that can be very dangerous because usually they mark channels or they mark rocks in the water, things to avoid. Drifting hazards in busy waters, things like, we call this a deadhead, a large piece of wood in the water. If a boat hits that going at a high speed, they can very easily start taking on water or sink. Uncharted rocks is another big danger for boats. If they discover that there's rocks in a place where their charts don't indicate that there's rocks there, we will put out navigational warnings about that to make sure people know to update their charts. As well, we want to keep other people working on the water safe as well. So ongoing marine work, like this person working on the water on a small barge, or diving operations, where they're actually below the water. So we try and keep everybody safe in the marine environment. So if a boat were to go by somebody who was diving underwater or on a flat barge and they were going by too fast, the wake behind the boat, which is the big wave produced by the boat, might rock that barge and someone could fall in the water. Again, that would be an emergency situation, and we try and avoid those. So these previous examples showed how we're the 911 of the sea with Coast Guard radio. But we also have the side that's vessel traffic services, which is kind of like air traffic control, but for ships. So we monitor ship movements, we make sure people are following the rules, we deal with emergencies, and we make sure ships have the correct information. So here's an actual image from our screens from a morning, I think this was a couple of weeks ago. So this was a morning I was working. So as you can see, we have a Coast Guard boat that's out here. Each of these white triangles with a line, that is a ship. So that's a Coast Guard boat, the Sir William Alexander. You may have heard of her. So that's a vessel that's coming inbound. These large areas here, we call these our traffic lanes. So you can see it almost looks like a road or lanes on a highway. This is how we make sure that ships stay away from each other. So we have an inbound lane and we have an outbound lane to make sure that they stay apart from each other and they stay safe. As well, you can see in here, we have a vessel that's picked up her anchor and she's coming into the traffic lanes. Here we have some vessels outbound. So these vessels and this vessel will have to know about each other. So we'll have talked to both of those boats as they were moving around, or I should say ships, they're large. So we were talking to all of these ships to make sure everybody knew what was going on and that everybody was following the rules. So you can see each of these vessels has a name. So we'll be calling them on the radio by their name and they'll be responding to us. Here's another picture of a little further inside Halifax Harbor. So you can see the same thing. We have our vessels outbound. We have one here, the SFL Composer. That's a ship that was headed outbound. These little lines in the water are on the charts and it tells them where they have to report in, and we give them updated traffic information, whatever's going on further out to sea. This orange that you can see here is actually radar return. So we have a radar site here at George's Island that gives us a radar picture of the harbor so we can see where these vessels are. You can see the large orange radar return. So you can see the radar return of the harbor here. And then each of these is a boat. And then these red squares are just notes for the operator that we put on the screen. So at any given time when we've got vessels moving around, this is exactly what we see out there. I took this as a screenshot, again, a couple of weeks ago. The light gray that you can see is the ocean, and this dark gray here is the land. So that's what we're looking at any given time, making sure everybody knows what's going on. So how does MCTS keep people safe? Another way is we screen vessels before they enter Canadian waters. So large vessels like bulkers, cruise ships, container ships, or this here is a car boat. So that's an auto carrier, as we call them. We make sure that they don't have any problems with the hull or the vessel equipment on board, so there's no pollution in Canadian waters. We also make sure that they have insurance certificates that they need in case they do have a collision or pollute. That way we know that somebody is there to take care of it. We also make sure other partner agencies are involved. So we'll talk to people like Transport Canada Marine Safety, who are in charge of giving the thumbs up, thumbs down if they've got defects or problems on board. They may let them come in, but maybe they have to have it repaired before they leave. So Transport Canada Marine Safety will monitor that and we'll coordinate with them. There may be security concerns, so we'll talk to people like Marine Security or Customs as well. One nice thing is this can all be done via email now. We use satellite email to talk to ships. So they can actually respond in their language, and the satellite email translates it to English for us, which makes it a lot easier to talk back and forth. MCTS also helps protect the environment. So it helps us manage communications and pollution incidents. So we'll be on the radio talking to response vessels. So you may have a vessel that takes on water or gets holed in the hull from a rock. They'll start letting out oil and other pollutants. And what they do is they put a floating boom around it to try and keep those pollutants near the vessel while they clean it up. So we'll then talk to the vessels that are responding and we'll coordinate the pollution cleanup and make sure that everybody knows what's going on. Another thing that we do is we'll help prevent collisions that could cause pollution incidents. So if we had two ships coming towards each other, we would warn them and make sure that they move away from each other in a safe manner. So that's also what we do as vessel traffic services. If vessels were to go into an area where whales have been sighted, we would tell those vessels to slow down. In fact, in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, which is that area we were looking at on the ice chart, if there are whales sighted, ships have to slow down to 10 nautical miles per hour, or they get sent fines, just like getting a speeding ticket if you're going too fast on the highway. So that's to prevent damage to whales and keep them safe as ships transit through that area. Another thing that we do is we'll send out notices to ship harvesters. Notices to fish harvesters. So what this is, all these different areas you can see are different sections where there's different fishing zones. So sometimes to help protect fish stocks, certain places have to be open, certain places are closed certain times of the year. So we make sure everybody knows when fisheries are opening and when fisheries are closing, what time of the year they're allowed to be opened or closed, or if there's any problems, like if there was a pollution incident, we may have to shut down fishing in a particular area. So then we would have to put out a notice to fish harvesters to let everybody know who was going to fish in that area that they're not allowed to do it anymore. So fisheries openings and fisheries closings help protect our fish stocks and make sure that future generations can also be engaged in fishing. So those are all sorts of things that MCTS does to protect the environment, protect people at sea, and protect shipping as it comes in through Canadian waters. So now we're actually going to go for a center tour of Halifax MCTS. So I'm going to take you out into the operations room. We'll take a look at our traffic sectors. I'll show you some of the equipment we have as well. We'll go over to Halifax Coast Guard Radio and we'll do a radio check with a Canadian Coast Guard vessel who's around today. So I'm going to disconnect from the network here. And I should drop onto my mobile network. But if I drop off, I will be right back. So we will see.
Hi, everyone. I'm back. So Tim's having a bit of a connection issue as he's trying to disconnect his computer so that he can tour us around the office. So we'll just have to give a minute to make sure that that connection is repaired, and then we'll be able to see more about the office that he works out of. And I think he's going to show us, like he said, some of the screens that are in operation so that we can see what the different staff members in the office get to see on a daily basis. And then I think, like he said, we were going to do a test call with one of the ships that are in the harbor. So, oh, I think he's back. Let's get him back.
I think I am.
Hi, Tim.
Hi there. Sorry about that. The mobile network apparently shuts down after an hour, and I had it on too long. All right, so I'm back with you. We're going to go take a look at the operations room. I'll bring the laptop out there, and we'll take a look around. I'll show you some of the equipment we use, and we'll do a radio check-in with Halifax Coast Guard Radio. So this may be a bit jumpy, but we'll go take a look at some operations stuff. So again, this is Halifax Coast Guard Radio, and we're going to start with Fundy Traffic, which does the Bay of Fundy. So here are the screens that we're watching at any given time. So you can see in here, these are the anchorages off St. John, New Brunswick. So each of these is a ship sitting at anchor that we're monitoring. And you can see over here, this is again that radar return that we're watching. So this is the port of St. John, and we're watching the radar return and everything over there. So that's what we're looking at on any given day. So this is actually our radio. So this is how we select which radio that we want to talk to people on. So what we'll do, they've got some calls there, so I'm going to have to step out. And over here, you can see this is actually the entrance to the Bay of Fundy. So the same thing, and then there's our radio over there. But this is the entrance to the Bay of Fundy, and then we have our Fundy traffic on the other side. Over here, we have Halifax traffic. So this is our offshore desk where, like we were saying, we look for pollution certificates and where we check for vessels. So we do that via email. And then this is the entrance to Halifax Harbor. So you can see that's exactly what we were looking at there, the traffic lanes coming into Halifax. So right now we have one vessel, the Sigma T, coming inbound through the traffic lanes. So we're monitoring that. You can see we have a few different screens that show the different parts of the center. And then over here, we actually have a call check recorder. So here we can actually play back radio calls. Everything's recorded that comes in through the radio at the center. We can make sure that we can play back radio calls.
Christopher Stanley, Halifax traffic, Roger.
And over here is Halifax Harbor. So the same thing. So this is Halifax traffic. We were looking at Fundy traffic on the other side. So that's Halifax traffic. So they're a little. All right. Up here is our supervisor position. So this is where I spend a lot of my day. We're just going to have to go because I've got a call there. But at the supervisor position, we have access to the entire rest of the center. So if anybody needs help or there's a place, anybody else goes for a break, the supervisor can actually take over their position. So over here, we have the equipment for Halifax Coast Guard Radio. So you can see here we have that call check recorder again. Up here, we have some specialized equipment that's called our direction finder. So if somebody calls using a radio, our towers will actually triangulate and tell us what their position is. We can use that equipment for that. Here's our radio station. So that's where we select what radio frequency that we want to use. And then we have lots of other pieces of equipment to talk to ships offshore. Are you going to be doing the radio check for us?
Yeah, you want me?
Or are we coming over there?
Don't know anything about it.
Do you want to do? Okay. So we're going to do a radio check with our Coast Guard boat. So we're going to come over here with Becky on the supervisor desk, and she's going to give him a call.
Earl Grey, Halifax traffic, over. tell them we were doing this.
We did.
Earl Grey, Halifax traffic. Roger, go 19, please. 19. Earl Grey, Halifax traffic on 19, over. Earl Grey, Halifax traffic. Roger, how copy? Oh, Roger, thank you. I'll try one more on MF. I should have sound 16. Earl Grey, Halifax traffic on 22 kilohertz.
Halifax traffic, Earl Grey, reading you loud and clear. How about me?
Earl Grey, Halifax traffic, Roger, read loud and clear. Thank you.
So that's what we do on Halifax Coast Guard Radio. Thank you, Becky. So that's basically what we do all day. We talk to ships, we do traffic information, we use the radios, and we deal with emergency situations. So I'm going to pop us back on here, and then I believe we're going to have some questions.
Thank you so much for the tour, Tim. It was really neat to see inside the office.
My pleasure.
So we have two classes here who'd like to join you on camera and ask some questions.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to bring up our first class. Let's start with Mrs. Bartlett's class. Hi, everyone. So if you have 2 or 3 questions for Tim, please go ahead and ask them.
Does anybody have a question that they would like to ask? Go ahead, Allie. What is your biggest ship?
Say again, what is my biggest
Ship.
What's your biggest?
Oh, biggest ship. The biggest one I have ever seen. We have container ships that come in now that massive post-Panamax container ships with a couple of 100,000 containers on board. And they're 200 meters long, something like that. So you look at these things look like almost an apartment building sideways in the water when you see them. These are massive ships. And they come in quite often.
That's all right. Technology, right?
We'll give him a few seconds to read that.
Yes, for sure.
What did you think of the presentation?
What did you think? I heard a bunch of students were talking about they didn't know that they did so many tasks.
It's pretty amazing to see what happens out of such a little office. They make sure that the whole coast is safe, essentially.
Yes, definitely. Anybody else have a question to get ready? Okay, a couple more questions. All right.
I think Tim is back with us.
I think I'm back. It didn't like being put back on the network. It's not liking that. But yes, these big container ships do a Europe to Halifax to New York and then back to Europe route. So we're on that route for us. Does anybody else have a question?
Go ahead, Tyson.
How do you guys know when the ships are anchored?
How do you know when the ships are anchored?
Oh, how do we know when they're anchored? If they're inside our area, they have to tell us they're going to anchor. There's some requirements that legally they're required.
Oh, no. It's okay, guys. Patience, please.
You know what's funny? We did several technology checks before this, and everything worked perfectly.
Of course.
Yeah, ships are legally required to tell us when they drop their anchor and when they go to heave them up. And then we have some electronic monitoring that we can put on that vessel to make sure that they're not moving around. And then what we do is we literally watch them on the screens and make sure that they don't instead they would.
Awesome. Another one, Erin?
How do like icebreakers breaks up ice?
Did you hear that one?
No, I didn't catch the question.
How do icebreakers actually break the ice?
Icebreakers actually break the ice a lot of times by actually going up on top of the ice pan and then cracking it under their weight. So their hulls are built really, really thick, really strong. And what they'll actually do is they'll drive up on top of an ice pan and split it with the weight of the ship. So instead of actually cutting through it like a knife, a lot of times they ride up on top of it and then break it underneath them. What the icebreakers will do is they'll break a whole channel by doing this, and other ships will follow along behind them. So that happens a lot of times in the winter going through the Gulf of St. Lawrence to get up to Quebec. They have to break through a big series of ice pans going through.
Good question there. Go ahead, Hamza.
What is the oldest ship still operating today?
What is the oldest ship, Coast Guard ship that you have that is still operating today?
I honestly don't know which one is the oldest. I would guess it's either the Sir William Alexander or the Earl Grey, but there may be a couple in Newfoundland that are older. But I have to say, I don't know the answer to that question. We can always get you that answer afterwards.
Yeah. And Anthony?
We'll do one more, and then we'll go over to our second class. That's
Perfect. Anthony? How do you bring up? How do you bring up the anchor on a ship?
Oh, on a ship, they have massive, massive drums, hydraulic drums that the anchor chain wraps around. So what they do is they engage those. Years and years ago on old sailing ships, it would all be done by hand. You had something called a capstan that went around in a circle, and literally you would just push it in a circle and it would pull the chain up. Now they have massive, either electric or hydraulic drums that basically pull the anchor chain off the bottom. So they have a massive thing on the front of the ship that pulls up that chain. When the anchor gets free of the water, they can move away from where they were anchored.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your question. All right, and now we have some students from Canada Academy joining us. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
Did you have some questions for Tim?
Go ahead, Wilson.
What's your favorite part about your job?
Oh no, did he freeze again? That's actually the question that I wanted to ask him too. So I'm excited to see what he has to say when he gets back.
What a great presentation, though. We really enjoyed. I grew up, we're in Ottawa, but I grew up Windsor and Detroit border. So we, of course, had Coast Guards that would work on the Detroit River there. So, and my daughter is a firefighter, but she spent the day with the Coast Guard department there. So when I saw the opportunity, I was like, yes, we're going to jump on this.
Wonderful. Well, we're so happy to have you. So
Wilson,
Tim,
do you want to ask your question?
Okay, what's your favorite part about your job?
My favorite part. One of the things that got me into this job was emergency response. So when somebody needs help on the radio and they ask for help and they're talking to me and I can make sure that they get the help they need, that to me is something like I feel like I've done a really good thing. I've done my job correctly when somebody needs help and I can get them that help that they need. So there's sort of a satisfaction there that if I wasn't there, that situation would have gotten really bad. Could have even ended up with somebody hurt or worse. And I made that better. To me, that's the best part of my job is when someone's in danger and I can help get them out of it.
Good question. Any others?
Hassan, go ahead.
How long have you been doing your job?
So how long have you been doing your job?
I have been in my job here with MCTS for about 15 years. So I've done everything from working out on the floor, just like we saw, working with the radios, to doing training with other people. So I trained new officers to work on the floor. And now I'm a supervisor over a bunch of different officers on the floor. But I've been in the Coast Guard for 15 years.
Hayden.
How many Maydays do you get annually, and how many Maydays do you get daily?
Annually, we just turned over. We do more than one case per day. So, but that means some days you get 3 and 4. Some days you might not get one. They're not all Maydays, but I would say probably at least 60 to 70 Maydays per year, if not closer to 100. So maybe one every 3 days kind of thing. And that can be anything from injuries on board to fire on board, taking on water, running to the shore, anything like that. They're all in the same category. But here at the station, we do about one every 3 days.
Right. Isaac?
Does the department run 24 hours daily?
Does the
Yes.
department? Okay, sorry, I didn't know whether you heard.
No,
that.
I did hear that one. So we are 24 hours a day. So anytime the day or night, if somebody calls or there's a ship coming into the harbor, there is always somebody here to answer that call. So my schedule is 2 days, 2 12-hour days. So I work from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. for 2 days. And then I do 2 nights, which is 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. for 2 days. And then I have a few days off. So I'm on a 9-day schedule. So my schedule isn't the same every single week. Sometimes I work weekends. Sometimes I work holidays. So I'm working days and then I'm working nights. So we do 12 hours and then somebody else will come in and relieve me at 7 p.m. and they'll work until 7 a.m. the next morning. So there's always people here at the station.
What type of person would be a good candidate to work in your department?
Somebody who likes to help people, somebody who is confident making decisions, because a lot of times we have to decide what priority radio calls are going to be. We have to put things in order. We need to deal with this before we deal with that, and we have to make those decisions. So somebody who's got good attention to details is excellent as well. I would say somebody who's inquisitive, because there's a lot of times when you hear a call, maybe somebody just says hello on the radio. It's worth checking into that, because that might be somebody who doesn't know how to use a radio, and it might be they're in danger. They didn't give you all the signals that you needed to tell you that they were in danger, but just that little bit of inquisitiveness. If you ask questions, it will always do you good in the long run. If you just check in with things, ask a couple more questions, make sure everything's taken care of. Somebody who goes that little bit extra would do very well in MCTS. And if you like helping people, it's a great job too.
Excellent. Anyone else have any further questions?
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for such great questions. We learned so much more about everything that you do, Tim. And I'll just say generally, like, thank you very much for sharing the stories about, you know, everything that you do, and for showing us inside of the office, and for really, I think, giving us some insights into what it means to manage safety at sea and make sure that, you know, the proper communications are happening and all of our mariners are safe. So thank you once again. For everyone that's listening, we have another presentation happening at the same time next week, and that one will be from a training officer from the Coast Guard College. So we'll be able to learn more about the skills that are necessary to work in the Coast Guard and all of the different opportunities that are available. So let's say thank you very much to the Coast Guard for supporting our adoptership program, and thank you very much to Tim for joining us today. And everyone can wave goodbye.
Thanks for being part of the program, everyone.
Bye now.
Thank you.